A contentious EU summit was held recently in Brussels, where European leaders spent hours arguing over how to finance long-term support for Ukraine's war effort and shattered economy. One central idea on the table was to leverage or use profits from frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine, a plan strongly championed by Germany and backed by several other hawkish states. But in the final stretch, several member states got cold feet, warning that such a move carried serious legal risks and could set a precedent that might one day be used against them. Countries that had been more cautious argued they did not want to shoulder risks that had initially fallen mainly on Belgium, where a large share of Russia's frozen central bank assets is held. The Financial Times described the chaos that erupted on the night of December 18th, as leaders bounced between rooms, emergency drafts, and side meetings trying to salvage a deal. According to that reporting, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz presented a complex proposal to tie a $105 billion equivalent loan for Kiev directly to Russian frozen assets as a future repayment source. However, the sheer technical complexity and opacity of the scheme ended up alienating even some of the leaders most sympathetic to Ukraine, who feared it might not stand up in court or at home. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was reportedly the main spoiler, firmly pushing back on the reparations loan concept, while France's President Emmanuel Macron largely kept his distance and offered little public backing. Officials and sources cited by Financial Times said, and I quote, "It was never going to fly. Something that technical and obscure spooked the leaders. It felt like an ambush. It was always a little bit of magic, to use the assets. And it all became too much. Meloni was the killer. Macron was mostly silent. The summit was the sideshow. The real action was going on outside the big room." Unquote. Meloni's main concern, officials say, was whether national parliaments, including her own, would ever sign off on a structure that essentially imported Belgium's financial guarantees and legal exposure. In the end, an alternative compromise, spearheaded by Belgium, was put forward and accepted. Instead of directly securitizing Russian assets, the EU would borrow on the markets and keep the assets frozen as a potential backstop. Even so, to preserve some elements of Merz's plan, leaders agreed they would continue working on ways to link immobilized Russian assets to Ukraine's reconstruction and to future loan repayment. On December 19th, the EU formally announced a $105 billion interest-free loan package for Ukraine to support its military and economic needs over the next 2 years. EU statements say this new loan is intended to cover Kiev's core defense and budget spending for roughly 2026 to 27, giving the Ukrainian government a predictable financial lifeline. As part of the deal, the financial obligations of Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic will not be increased, allowing these more skeptical governments to stand aside without blocking the package. Hungary had previously opposed both direct EU-level financing for Kiev and any loan arrangement that leaned explicitly on Russian assets, calling such steps a dead end. After the summit, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stressed that Ukraine would only be expected to repay this EU loan if Russia eventually pays war reparations for the damage caused by its invasion. If Moscow refuses to pay, EU leaders reserve the right to tap immobilized Russian assets to service or repay the loan, in what Merz described as a move that would be taken in full accordance with international law, according to outlets citing him and the summit conclusions.